Marcus Johnson walked slowly up the stairs to his third-floor apartment, his body heavy with exhaustion. It was nearly 11 p.m. on a Friday. While most people were starting their weekends, he had just finished a 12-hour shift at the warehouse, followed by 4 hours of driving for a rideshare company. His feet ached in his worn work boots, but the pain couldn't compare to the constant worry about money that followed him everywhere. As he turned the corner in the hallway, Marcus noticed something on his door from a distance. His heart sank when he got closer. A bright orange paper was taped there, the words "Notice of EVICTION" printed in bold black letters at the top. Even though he had been expecting it, seeing it made his legs feel weak. 30 days to vacate the premises, Marcus read aloud, his voice barely a whisper in the empty hallway. He unlocked his door and stepped inside, not bothering to turn on the lights. The small one-bedroom apartment had been his home for 4 years. It wasn't much, but it was his place, or at least it had been. Marcus sat heavily on his couch, still holding the notice. 3 months ago, he had caught pneumonia. With no paid sick leave, he missed 2 weeks of work. Then came the hospital bills. Even after working double shifts since recovering, he couldn't catch up on the rent he had fallen behind on. His phone buzzed. It was a text from his mother. "You okay, baby? You usually call after your shift." Marcus stared at the screen, but couldn't bring himself to respond yet. His mother had enough worries of her own. At 63, she still worked as a home health aide, her own housing situation always uncertain. His father had passed away 5 years ago, never having owned property despite working construction his whole life. Marcus thought about his grandparents too, who had moved north during the Great Migration, always renting, always at the mercy of landlords and rising costs. 3 generations of hard work, and still no solid ground to stand on. The thought sparked something inside him, a deep anger, but also a determination he hadn't felt before. Marcus pulled his laptop from his backpack and opened it. The screen's glow illuminated his tired face as he began searching. How to fix credit, first-time homebuyer programs, housing assistance. He stayed up for hours, taking notes on a pad of paper, the eviction notice sitting next to him as a constant reminder. As the sun began to rise, Marcus finally texted his mother back. "I'm okay. Had some bad news, but working on a plan. We'll call you tomorrow." Then he took the eviction notice and pinned it to the wall above his desk. It would stay there as a reminder of this moment, the moment he decided things would be different. In the small bathroom, Marcus splashed cold water on his face and looked at himself in the mirror. His eyes were red from lack of sleep, but there was something new in them now. Purpose. "This stops with me," he said to his reflection. "No more evictions. No more starting over. This cycle ends now." He had no idea how he would do it yet. The path from eviction to ownership seemed impossible, especially for a black man with damaged credit and limited savings in a system that had historically worked against people who looked like him. But for the first time, Marcus believed there might be a way forward, and he was determined to find it. 2 weeks after receiving the eviction notice, Marcus stood outside his cousin Darius's apartment building with 2 suitcases and a backpack containing everything he could keep. Earlier that day, he had sold his small TV, his microwave, and most of his furniture to a neighbor for less than half what they were worth. The cash in his pocket felt like nothing compared to what he had lost. "You can stay as long as you need, man," Darius said, helping Marcus carry his bags up to the 3rd floor. "It's tight, but we'll make it work." Tight was an understatement. Darius lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with his wife Keisha and their 2 young children. Marcus would be sleeping on a fold-out couch in the living room, with no privacy and little space for his belongings. "I appreciate this," Marcus said, feeling the shame of needing help. "It won't be for long. I promise." That first night, after everyone had gone to bed, Marcus lay awake on the uncomfortable couch. The sounds were all wrong. Darius's snoring through the thin walls, the refrigerator's hum, the occasional car passing by outside windows that faced a different street than he was used to. Nothing felt like home. He pulled out his phone and opened the notes he had taken on homeownership. The words blurred together as exhaustion washed over him. How was he supposed to save for a down payment when he could barely keep a roof over his head? Marcus woke at 4:30 a.m., careful not to disturb anyone as he got ready for his warehouse job. In the dim light from his phone, he noticed Darius's 5-year-old daughter had left her homework on the coffee table. She was learning to write her address. Home is where I live with my family, she had printed in careful letters. But where was his home now? By the end of his first week at Darius's, Marcus had established a routine. He worked his warehouse job from 5 a.m. to 2 p.m., came back to rest for an hour, then drove for the rideshare company until 9 p.m. After dinner, while everyone else watched TV or went to bed, he researched housing programs on his phone. One night, scrolling through a community Facebook page, Marcus saw a post about a free housing workshop at the local library. First Steps to Homeownership for Underserved Communities, it was called, hosted by a nonprofit called Build and Bridge. You going out? Keisha asked, noticing Marcus putting on his jacket the following Saturday morning. Yeah, there's this workshop at the library about buying homes, he explained, feeling slightly embarrassed. Probably a waste of time, but... No, that's good, Keisha said, surprising him with her enthusiasm. My cousin in Baltimore did something like that. She owns her place now. The library meeting room was packed with about 30 people, most of them black and brown faces. Marcus took a seat in the back, feeling out of place. What was he doing here? He couldn't even afford rent, let alone a mortgage. A woman in her 60s with silver dreadlocks stood at the front. My name is Diane Washington, she began. 20 years ago, I was a bank manager. I approved and denied mortgage applications every day. I saw firsthand how the system works, and how it doesn't work for people who look like us. Marcus found himself leaning forward, listening intently. But I'm not here to talk about obstacles, Ms. Diane continued. I'm here to show you the paths that exist. Paths to ownership that no one may have told you about. As she spoke about credit repair, down payment assistance, and first-time homebuyer programs, Marcus took notes furiously. For the first time since the eviction, something stirred inside him besides shame and anger. It was small, but unmistakable. Hope. When the workshop ended, while others rushed out, Marcus approached Ms. Diane. I just got evicted, he said simply. But I don't want to rent ever again. I need to learn everything you know. Ms. Diane looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. Come back next Saturday. We're just getting started. The following Saturday, Marcus arrived at the library 30 minutes early. He sat in the front row this time, notebook open and ready. When Ms. Diane walked in, she nodded at him with a small smile of recognition. You're serious about this, she said, not as a question. Yes, ma'am, Marcus replied. I can't keep living on someone else's terms. As more people filed in, Marcus noticed that only about half of the faces from the previous week had returned. Ms. Diana seemed to notice too. The path to ownership is a marathon, not a sprint, she began. Many people want the result but aren't ready for the journey. For those of you who came back today, I see your determination. This session focused on understanding credit scores. Marcus learned that his score of 580 was considered poor, but not unfixable. Ms. Diane explained how credit utilization, payment history, and length of credit all factored into the number that so often determined people's futures. The system wasn't built with us in mind, she said frankly, but we can still use it to our advantage if we understand the rules. After the workshop, Ms. Diane approached Marcus as he gathered his things. You work 2 jobs, she asked. Yes, warehouse in the morning, driving in the evening. She nodded thoughtfully. That's good income, but do you have time for individual counseling sessions? That's where the real progress happens. Marcus hesitated. Time was the one thing he didn't have, but then he remembered the orange eviction notice that he kept as a reminder. I'll make time, he said firmly. The next Tuesday, Marcus met with Ms. Diane in her small office at the nonprofit. The walls were covered with before and after photos of homes and smiling families holding keys. These are all people we've helped, she said, following his gaze. Regular folks, just like you. Marcus wanted to believe her, but doubt nagged at him. Most of these people probably had help from family or something. I'm starting from zero. Less than zero with my credit. Miss Diana leaned back in her chair. Let me tell you about my son, she said, released from prison 5 years ago with nothing but the clothes on his back. Bad credit, no job history for 10 years, and a record following him everywhere. Today, he owns a duplex. She pulled out a folder. It took him 3 years of sacrifice and planning. Are you willing to give it that long? Marcus thought about where he would be in 3 years if nothing changed, probably facing another eviction, still living paycheck to paycheck, still building no equity. Yes, he said. 3 years is nothing. Together, they created a 3-year plan broken into phases. Phase 1 would focus on credit repair, disputing errors on his report, paying down high-interest debt, and establishing positive payment history. Phase 2 would concentrate on saving for a down payment while researching assistance programs. Phase 3 would involve pre-approval and the actual home search. Your credit is your first priority, Ms. Diane explained. Without that foundation, nothing else matters. She helped him draft letters to the credit bureaus to remove an error, collection account that wasn't his. Then she showed him how to set up automatic payments for his remaining bills to avoid future late payments. Next, she said, we need to talk about your banking habits. Marcus shifted uncomfortably. He had a checking account, but rarely kept money in it for long. You need separate accounts, Ms. Diane advised. One for bills, one for emergencies, and one specifically for your down payment fund. Even if you can only put $20 a week in there at first, it needs to be untouchable. As their session ended, Ms. Diane handed Marcus a homework assignment, a spending tracker to record every dollar for the next month. This is your business now, she said, her eyes serious. And you're the CEO. Know where every dollar goes. Walking out of the nonprofit, Marcus felt both overwhelmed and empowered. The path ahead was long, but for the first time it was visible. He had a map, and he had a guide. Now he needed the discipline to follow through. 3 months after his first meeting with Ms. Diane, Marcus sat at Darius's kitchen table late at night, reviewing his budget spreadsheet. The numbers were clear. Staying with his cousin's family, even contributing to groceries and utilities, was saving him over $800 a month in rent. But the cramped conditions were wearing on everyone. He heard footsteps and looked up to see Keisha in her bathrobe. Still up working on your money stuff? She asked, getting a glass of water. Yeah, just checking where I stand, Marcus replied. Keisha leaned against the counter. Listen, we love having you here, but the kids need their space back eventually. You know that, right? Marcus nodded. I know. I've been looking at rooms for rent. Found one that might work. The next day, Marcus visited a small room in a house owned by an elderly woman named Mrs. Porter. The room was barely bigger than a closet, with just enough space for a twin bed and a small dresser. The bathroom was shared with another tenant. The kitchen was available between certain hours. It's not much, Mrs. Porter said apologetically. But it's clean, and I keep the house quiet. How much? Marcus asked. $450 a month, utilities included. It was less than half what he'd been paying for his apartment. Marcus did the math in his head. This would allow him to save even more for his future home. I'll take it, he said. Moving day was quick. His few remaining possessions fit in the trunk of his car. As Marcus unpacked his clothes into the small dresser, he reminded himself this was temporary, a strategic step backward to move forward. That evening, he opened a new savings account specifically for his down payment fund. He set up an automatic transfer of $600 from each paycheck, an amount that would have been impossible in his old apartment but was manageable now. The deposit confirmation gave him a satisfaction that no luxury ever had. The sacrifices continued beyond housing. Marcus sold his car, his primary tool for his rideshare job, and bought a used bicycle instead. The decision meant giving up his evening driving income, but the math made sense. No car payment, no insurance, no gas, no maintenance. He found a warehouse position closer to Mrs. Porter's house that offered night shifts with slightly higher pay to make up some of the difference. His daily routine became a testament to his determination. Wake up at 3 p.m., bike to work for the 4 p.m. to midnight shift, bike home, sleep, repeat. On weekends, he attended Ms. Diane's workshops and met with her for one-on-one counseling. You've paid off 2 credit cards completely, she noted during one session, 6 months into his plan. And your credit score is up 45 points already. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. I'm eating ramen 4 nights a week to do it. Ms. Diane's face grew serious. The sacrifice is real, but don't sacrifice your health. That costs more in the long run. Taking her advice, Marcus developed new skills. He learned to cook large batches of beans, rice, and vegetables on Sundays, portioning them for the week ahead. He found a free clinic for his checkups. He used the library for internet access rather than paying for his own. Each small decision was a brick in the foundation he was building. 1 year into what he now called his sacrificed years, Marcus received a letter from the credit bureau. The collection error had been removed from his report, and his score had jumped another 30 points. That night, he increased his automatic savings transfer by $50. In his small room, where he could touch both walls if he stretched out his arms, Marcus pinned up a photo he'd printed at the library, a modest house with a small yard. It wasn't any specific house, just a symbol of what was possible. Next to it, he pinned his original eviction notice, now faded but still powerful. Between them, he wrote his new credit score -655 and drew an arrow pointing upward. The room was tiny, but for the first time in his life, Marcus felt like he was creating space for his future to grow. 18 months into his journey, Marcus sat in the community room of Build and Bridge, surrounded by a circle of 10 people. This was his third meeting with the Homebuyers Circle, a support group Ms. Diane had encouraged him to join. "I hit a milestone this week," Marcus said when it was his turn to share. "My credit score passed 680. The group responded with genuine applause and nods of understanding. Unlike friends who couldn't relate to his strict saving habits or family who thought he was obsessed with money, these people understood exactly what that number meant and how hard he had worked for it. "That's pre-approval territory," said Louisa, a nurse who had been saving for 2 years. "You're getting close." The Homebuyers Circle had become an unexpected lifeline for Marcus. They met twice a month, people of different ages, backgrounds, and incomes, all working toward the same goal. Some, like Marcus, had faced eviction. Others were tired of paying rising rents with nothing to show for it. All of them shared the dream of ownership in a system that often seemed designed to keep it out of reach. After the meeting, Jason, a city bus driver who had recently closed on a small condo, pulled Marcus aside. "Have you heard about the Community Land Trust program?" he asked. Marcus shook his head. "You should look into it," Jason continued. "They separate the cost of the land from the house, which makes the purchase price lower. I almost went that route before I found my place." That night, in his small rented room, Marcus researched community land trusts. The concept was new to him, nonprofit organizations that bought land and kept ownership of it, while selling the homes on the land at affordable prices. Buyers would own their house but lease the land long-term at a nominal fee. The more he read, the more excited he became. There was a land trust operating in his city, focused on neighborhoods that had been historically redlined, including the area where his grandmother had once lived before being priced out. The next day, Marcus called the number listed on their website. "We're actually holding an information session next week," the woman on the phone told him. "I'd recommend attending before applying. The waiting list is about 6 months right now." At the information session, Marcus learned that the trust had recently acquired several vacant properties in his grandmother's old neighborhood. They were renovating the homes and would sell them to qualified buyers earning below 80% of the area median income. "The average sale price is $130,000, compared to the $220,000 market value," explained the presenter. "And we provide additional down payment assistance for first-time buyers." Marcus did the math quickly. With his current savings and credit score, a home through the land trust might be possible within a year, sooner than his original 3-year plan. He filled out an application that day, trying to contain his excitement. He had learned that in this process, nothing was guaranteed. Back at the next Homebuyers Circle meeting, Marcus shared what he had learned about the land trust. "That's how my cousin got her house," said Terrell, a younger member of the group. "She pays like $700 a month now, less than she was paying in rent." As others shared their own leads and resources, Marcus realized how much stronger they were together. Each person's knowledge and experience benefited everyone else. When the meeting ended, Ms. Diane held Marcus back. "I'm proud of your progress," she said, "but I want to prepare you. This next phase, when homeownership starts to feel real and possible, it can be the hardest." "Why's that?" Marcus asked. "Because hope is powerful but fragile," she replied. "When we start to believe something good might actually happen, we become vulnerable to disappointment. People sometimes abandon their plans right when they're closest to success." Marcus thought about this as he biked back to his rented room. The land trust wasn't a guaranteed path, but it was a possible one. And now he had not just Ms. Diane, but an entire circle of people supporting his journey. For the first time, ownership didn't feel like a distant dream. It felt like an approaching reality he needed to prepare for. At the 2-year mark of his journey, Marcus stood in the hospital hallway, phone pressed to his ear. His manager's voice sounded tinny and distant. "I understand it's a family emergency, but we need you on shift tonight. We're already short-staffed." "My mother collapsed at work," Marcus explained, his voice tight. "They think it might be her heart. I can't leave her here alone." There was a pause on the line. "I'm sorry, but I need to know if you're coming in or not." "I can't," Marcus said firmly. "Then don't bother coming in tomorrow either." The line went dead. Marcus leaned against the wall, closing his eyes briefly. The job he held for 8 months. Gone. The steady paycheck that had allowed him to save consistently. Gone. Inside the hospital room, his mother lay connected to monitors, her normally vibrant face looking small against the white pillows. "Who were you talking to?" she asked weakly. "Nobody important," Marcus lied, putting on a smile. "How are you feeling?" Over the next week, as his mother remained in the hospital, the financial reality of her situation became clear. With inadequate health insurance and months of ignored symptoms because she couldn't afford to miss work, she now faced significant medical bills. The doctor prescribed medications that would cost nearly $300 per month. "I'll figure something out," his mother insisted. "Don't you worry about me." But Marcus did worry. Sitting in his tiny rented room that night, he stared at his savings account balance, $12,460. The down payment fund he had sacrificed so much to build, the foundation of his future. Without hesitation, he transferred $3,000 to his checking account. The next morning, Marcus met with the hospital's billing department to arrange a payment plan for his mother. Then he helped her settle into her apartment, stocked her refrigerator, and filled her prescriptions. "You shouldn't be spending your money on me," she protested. "It's just money," Marcus said, though the words felt hollow. "I can make more." But as he biked home that evening, the weight of the setback crashed over him. 2 years of ramen dinners, of declining invitations to save money, of living in a room smaller than some people's closets. And now he was further from his goal than he had been 3 months ago. For the first time since receiving that eviction notice, Marcus felt like giving up. Maybe people like him weren't meant to own homes. Maybe the system was too stacked against him. He didn't attend the next Homebuyers Circle meeting, or the one after that. He found a new warehouse job, but his heart wasn't in his savings plan anymore. What was the point? 3 weeks into his spiral, his phone rang. It was Ms. Diane. "You missed another meeting," she said without preamble. "Been busy with a new job," Marcus replied. "And your mother?" "She's doing better." There was a pause. "And your down payment fund?" Marcus sighed. "I had to use some of it. About a quarter." "I see," Ms. Diane said. "So now you have what? Around 9,000 still saved?" "Something like that." "And you've decided that's a reason to throw away 2 years of progress?" The direct question caught Marcus off guard. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to. Your empty chair said it for you." Her voice softened slightly. "Life happens, Marcus. Emergencies happen. This is exactly why we build emergency funds, separate from down payment funds. But you made a choice to help your mother, and it was the right choice." "But now I'm back where I started," Marcus said. "No, you're not." Ms. Diane corrected him firmly. "You have a credit score over 680. You have experience managing money. You have knowledge about home buying programs. And you still have $9,000 more than you had 2 years ago." She paused. "The Community Land Trust called about your application. They have a property coming available that might be a good fit for you. But if you've given up, I'll tell them to move on to the next person on the list." Marcus sat up straighter. "What property?" "Sounds like you haven't completely given up after all," Ms. Diane said, and Marcus could hear the smile in her voice. "Meeting tomorrow at 6. Don't be late." As he hung up the phone, Marcus looked at the eviction notice still pinned to his wall. Next to it was his mother's face in a small photo frame. He hadn't failed. He had simply faced a detour on his journey. "It needs work," the Community Land Trust representative said as she unlocked the front door of the small house. "But the foundation is solid, and the roof was replaced just last year." Marcus stepped inside, his heart beating faster than normal. The living room was empty, with faded wallpaper peeling in the corners and scuffed hardwood floors. To some, it might have looked disappointing. To Marcus, it looked like possibility. 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, the representative continued, walking him through the space. The kitchen will need updating eventually, but all appliances are functional. Marcus followed silently, taking mental notes. The house was in the Oakwood neighborhood, the very area where his grandmother had rented an apartment for nearly 30 years before rising costs forced her to move. He remembered visiting her as a child, playing in the small park just 2 blocks away. The purchase price through our program would be $127,500, she explained. The market value is around $210,000, but because the land trust maintains ownership of the land itself, you're only buying the structure. Marcus nodded, the numbers already calculating in his head. With his current savings of just over $10,000 and the down payment assistance program Ms. Diane had helped him apply for, this might actually be possible. "What's the monthly payment look like?" he asked, trying to keep his voice casual. "With current interest rates and the land lease fee, you're looking at approximately $850 per month, including taxes and insurance." $850, less than he had paid for his apartment before the eviction, for a house that would be his. "I'd like to apply," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the emotion swelling in his chest. The application process was both exciting and terrifying. Marcus submitted his financial information, completed the required homeownership courses, and waited. Every day at work, he checked his phone during breaks, hoping for news. 3 weeks later, Marcus sat across from Ms. Diane in her office. "The Land Trust has pre-approved your application," she said, sliding a folder across her desk. "Now we need to secure your mortgage." Together, they reviewed the options. Because of the land trust structure and his completion of the homebuyer education program, Marcus qualified for a special mortgage product with only 3% down. His credit score, now at 695, was high enough to secure a reasonable interest rate. "We still need to pass inspection and appraisal," Ms. Diane cautioned. "Don't start packing yet." But Marcus couldn't help but feel hopeful. That night, he called his mother. "Mom, I might be buying a house," he said, the words still feeling strange in his mouth. "A house?" She sounded shocked. "How? Where?" "It's actually in Grandma's old neighborhood. Remember that little greenhouse on Maple Street? It's a few doors down from there." His mother was quiet for a moment. "Your grandmother would be so proud," she finally said, her voice thick with emotion. "She always wanted to own a place there." The inspection revealed some issues: old wiring, a leak under the kitchen sink, missing insulation in the attic. For a moment, Marcus feared these problems would end his dream, but the land trust agreed to address the electrical concerns before closing, and Marcus negotiated for a slightly lower purchase price to account for the other repairs he would need to make. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork, phone calls, and meetings. Marcus took a day off work to attend the closing, sitting at a table with more documents than he ever seen in his life. "Sign here, and here, initial here." The closing agent pointed to line after line. With each signature, the reality grew more concrete. When Marcus signed the final document, the closing agent looked up with a smile. "Congratulations, Mr. Johnson. You're now a homeowner." She handed him a set of keys, real keys to a real house that belonged to him. Marcus held them in his palm, their weight feeling significant beyond their metal. Nearly 3 years after standing in a hallway with an eviction notice, he held the keys to his future. That night, Marcus drove to the empty house, his house, and sat alone in what would be his living room. The space echoed around him, full of possibility. Outside the window, streetlights illuminated the neighborhood his grandmother had loved. "I did it, Grandma," he whispered into the empty room. "I brought us home." 2 weeks after closing, Marcus stood in the driveway of his home, watching his cousin Darius's truck pull up. The bed was loaded with folding chairs, tables, and coolers filled with food. "Man, I still can't believe this is your place," Darius said, hopping out of the driver's seat. "Sometimes I can't either," Marcus admitted. Together, they carried the supplies inside and set up in the living room. Marcus had managed to buy a used couch and dining table, but the house was still sparsely furnished. It didn't matter for today's gathering. What mattered was that it was his. By noon, the small house was filled with people. His mother sat proudly in the place of honor, an armchair Marcus had found at a thrift store and cleaned meticulously. Miss Diane arrived with a potted plant. A housewarming tradition, she explained. Several members from the homebuyers' circle came, including Louisa and Terrell. Even Mrs. Porter, his former landlady, had accepted his invitation. As people ate and chatted, moving between the living room and the small backyard, Marcus felt a sense of completion. This gathering wasn't just a housewarming, it was a celebration of a journey. When the food had been eaten and the conversations had settled into a comfortable rhythm, Marcus cleared his throat. "I want to thank everyone for coming today," he began, his voice slightly nervous. 3 years ago, I was standing in a hallway, reading an eviction notice and feeling like a failure. The room grew quiet. I didn't know then that it would be the beginning of something, not the end. Marcus gestured around him. I didn't know I could be standing here, in my own home, with all of you. His mother wiped a tear from her eye. I learned a lot these past 3 years, Marcus continued. I learned that the system isn't built for people like us to succeed, but that doesn't mean we can't. I learned that sacrifice isn't just giving things up. It's exchanging something small now for something bigger later. He looked at Ms. Diane. I learned that I wasn't alone, even when it felt like I was. There were people who had made this journey before me, who were willing to show me the path. Ms. Diane nodded, her eyes shining with pride. Most importantly, Marcus said, I learned that ownership is about more than a deed or a mortgage. It's about taking control of your future. It's about building something that can't be taken away with a notice taped to your door. He raised his plastic cup. So I'm not just celebrating a house today. I'm celebrating all of us, our resilience, our community, and our right to claim space in this world. The room filled with applause and raised cups. As the celebration continued, Marcus stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The small backyard wasn't much, just a patch of grass with a few struggling flowers along the fence, but it was his. Next spring, he would plant a vegetable garden, maybe put up a bench under the single oak tree. He heard the screen door open behind him and turned to see his mother. Your father would have been so proud, she said, standing beside him. He tried his whole life to do what you've done. Marcus put his arm around her shoulders. I couldn't have done it without you. Without the example you and Dad set about working hard and never giving up. She looked up at him. Will you help me do what you did? I'm tired of renting too. We start tomorrow, Marcus promised. I've already talked to Ms. Diane about it. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across his yard, Marcus thought about the journey that had brought him here. The eviction that had felt like an ending had actually been a beginning. The tiny room that had felt like a step backward had been a necessary path forward. The setbacks that had seemed like failures had been tests of his resolve. In 3 years, he had transformed from a man being forced from his home to a man welcoming others into his. The deed in his name represented more than property. It represented a broken cycle, a new legacy, and the power of reclaiming control over his own story. Marcus Johnson was home, finally and truly, and it was just the beginning.